Hey, so, like Zelda, everybody who's played this series seems to have a good and strong opinion on it. You got folks who love them old classic titles like Link to the Past or the original. Maybe not so much Zelda 2. Hey buddy, we'll talk about you later. Special little guy. But most people like my age, they all hopped on the Zelda train between Link to the Past and like Wind Waker. Which, I mean, makes sense, but this video is all about timelines and look, it'll make sense in a second. I'm laying a scene here. Cool? So, Link to the Past has like 0 time-related shenanigans, despite time-related shenanigans being part of the title. Ocarina of Time comes in and hits us with 2 big timelines. Spend the opening of the game as a child, do some things that maybe you shouldn't send a child to do. I mean, I get spiders. What mom hasn't sent her child into the unyielding darkness to smash something with more legs than good sense? Maybe develop arachnophobia while you're at it. It's not like these 8-legged freaks are gonna be a basic part of your life from now on. Great. And then you spend some time as an adult doing a bunch of kid stuff, like carnival games, or slaying zombies, joining a band, dissecting pigs in biology. So you put the pig on the spittle and you're about to serve up the most excellent bacon, but your girlfriend says she's vegan and she sends you home to be a kid again, and then you get lost in the woods and maybe turn into a skeleton warrior? Or was it all a dream? Following up after the N64 adventures is our first jaunt on the GameCube, The Wind Waker. Hyrule becomes a bit moist, so you hop in a boat and it's time to set sail for adventure in the future of Zelda as a new Link in a new world. The tapestry in the intro seems to show a childlike Link riding off into the sunset on his noble steed. So okay, sure, Link's running off to do stuff with masks, I guess. This opening cinematic of The Wind Waker outright spells out a world where Link left the land of Hyrule and in doing so, left it defenseless to a second offense by Ganon. Good job breaking it, hero. To be honest, it's super unclear when the guy with the really big ears named Ganondorf does an apocalyptic envisioning of It Ain't Easy Being Green, and why the spirit of the hero isn't there to host Hyrule's greatest barbecue again. Ah, jeez, do I have to hit up the spirit of the hero already? Shoot, there's so much to cover, and I'm not even to the title of the video yet. Anyway, the timeline is a little muddled, but it's pretty clear that the old Hyrule falls, and by the end of the game, you make Ganon into a statue and leave him underwater as the old civilization falls. God, I wonder if his rock gets, like, weathered over time, and when he breaks out again, he's all super smooth. The exfoliation alone must do wonders. Oh my god, he got jacked. So, here's the next Zelda game, and this is where things get, sketchy? Now, it wasn't always clear where Zelda games fell in terms of order, and for most folks, we were happy to consider launch order to be kind of its own timeline. But here's where people were starting to wonder why this green dude became a pig man, but he was already a thick magic boar in the original 3 mainline games. Sub-Zelda 2's game over screen, I told you we'd be back again. Anywho, this not-a-cartoon mainline Zelda title was made in response to that childlike cell shading, and it was revealed at some point that this game would be following the child timeline. Okay, what? I'm playing it up a little, because at this point fans were already online trying to fit in all these extra spin-off titles, like Link's Awakening and the Oracle titles, into a cohesive timeline, and the concept of splitting off the Zelda series into a world that had 2 concurrent timelines, thanks to the 2 eras in Ocarina of Time, made a lot of sense. There was generally an official timeline at this point that described Zelda 1 leading into Zelda 2, but Link to the Past being described as a prequel, with Awakening following the same Link as the 3rd game, which is now the first game in the line. Not confusing at all. But things got screwy shortly thereafter. By the time Majora's Mask is out, there was really no attaching a timeline to anything at an official level, except a horrible little monster of a timeline dropped by Nintendo of America, placing all 8 games in a straight line. What's worse is that they said it was all the same Link. This little subsection of history is called the Hall of Time, and it's just, well, I wouldn't call it good. But at this point, it's generally accepted that Ocarina of Time is a retelling of the imprisoning war mentioned in the start of Link to the Past, which firmly placed Ocarina of Time at the start but also as a prequel to the prequel. Wind Waker comes out and it's clear it's a sequel to Ocarina of Time. Huzzah, we said this, but when Twilight Princess dropped, Aonuma is like, hey, what's up? I'm the big Zelda guy behind Miyamoto, and this is also a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. Just this time, it's the child timeline. Cool. Our timeline is broken. So, anyway, everything pretty much got tossed out the window at that point. Officially, there's 2 timelines, and everyone gets mad for a long time because not only do we have to figure out where everything falls, but now we got 2 direct sequels to Ocarina of Time, and we also know that Ocarina of Time is a prequel to Link to the Past. That's cool. I like a puzzle. What's that? We're still not at the point of the video? Look, man, if you're gonna tackle the Zelda timeline, you gotta drop context for everything. So anyway, there's this thing called the Four Sword, which is basically a mixture of power between the Master Source and the Triforce. Oh god, I haven't even mentioned those yet. Look, this isn't a Zelda primer, but basically this is the Blade of Evil's Bane, and this is the manifestation of the 3 goddesses who created Hyrule given physical form. Cool? Cool. Anyway, neither of these things really matter in the next 3 games that heavily feature the Four Sword, the Minish Cap, Four Swords, and Four Swords Adventures. Due to the lack of Ganon in Minish Cap, it's usually placed before Ocarina of Time, and thanks to the bundle of Four Swords with the GBA release of Link to the Past, Four Swords is usually seen as a direct sequel to it, and Four Swords Adventures sees the return of Blue Pig Ganon, with his appearance heavily based on the Link to the Past Ganon. It's a bit anachronistic, as during the events of the GameCube title, you chase after Ganondorf in the desert, as he gains power behind the scenes, until you run into the big bad at the end of the game. So maybe let's not count this guy for now. We're gonna put you in the maybe baby pile. This is just a spin-off anyway. The Skyward Sword drops sometime later, and it's deemed the first Zelda in the timeline. And that's fine. Cool, even. We know where all this starts, and what ho? Nintendo's releasing the official timeline in a big old book called the Hyrule Historia. I mean, if that's the case, then what's even the point of caring about this timeline video if Ninty's already got it set in stone? Well, to be honest, it's hot garbage. On top of that, the encyclopedia came out a couple years after that, and ended up swapping around a few titles when it added the new ones, so even they aren't sure where everything lies. But the main gimmick of this timeline is that it introduced something that sat very, very poorly with some Zelda fans. And we finally reached the point of our video. The Fallen Timeline. So apparently, when Link became Hyrule's sole proprietor of pork in Ocarina of Time, there's a set of events where during the final climactic battle with Ganon, Link dies. He straight up loses. Apparently forgot to bring his Megaton hammer, or the Goron knife, or bottle, I guess. And it's now from this timeline where the whole imprisoning war happens that gets referenced to in Link to the Past. Which, wow, I cannot begin to understand how Princess Zelda gets out of that situation, and yet manages to imprison Ganon in the Sacred Realm anyway with the hero wielding the Master Sword. Sounds like Link actually doesn't matter when you put it that way. But something kinda irked me about this Fallen timeline, and it's, oh yeah, how does that even make sense? If straight up getting a game over matters so much that it could split the official timeline, why is it so important that it happens at the end of Ocarina of Time? First time I died to a Dodongo. Guess that split the timeline. I wonder if this is the one where Sonic happens to run around Hyrule. Probably. So I'm supposed to buy that Ocarina of Time is so special that losing to the final boss is somehow a canon thing that happens despite the original and the 3DS remake having no single cutscene or special mention of the Fallen timeline starting if you perchance run out of fairies in the final bout. And if that doesn't strike a chord with you, then you didn't play Minish Cap and go too slowly at the end of the game. That's a thing that happens. It's got a whole game over screen that's special. But the concept of a timeline splitting a third way stemming from Ocarina of Time isn't actually all that far-fetched. See, Ocarina of Time is a game about time travel, And as we've learned from the games themselves, it isn't shy about creating timeline splits. And as Breath of the Wild serves to bring all the disparate parts of Zelda together into a single timeline again, and as certain other games seeking to start the whole splitting process over again, it is peppered with references to each timeline being canon, specifically with the 3 Leviathan skeletons found on the map, each one referencing different cataclysmic events that are more or less in line with the 3 separate timelines that Nintendo's served up for us. So, how do we reconcile a timeline split that makes sense, that being the child and adult timelines, and the red-headed stepchild, the era of the fallen timeline? Well, to be honest, it's just that it's not so much as a fallen timeline as it is abandoned. So, at 2 certain points within Ocarina of Time, the adult Link must return to the past with new information and heavily adjust the timeline so that the task of saving Hyrule becomes possible. These 2 instances are the Spirit Temple and, of course, the Man in the Windmill, and it makes sense how they lead into each other. You arrive as an adult to find the agitated music man playing the sped-up version of his traditional melody, and he teaches you the notes to summon storms. Returning to the windmill as a child, you play this future song for the man who would later teach it to you, creating the most well-known paradox in Zelda lore. The Song of Storms is a melody that is created from nothing, but there are theories explaining its existence. Perhaps the first Link, that's a capital F for first, learned it from consulting the ghost of the Composer brothers, whom he had already learned the Sun Song off of the royal family's inner mausoleum tombstone. That is a sentence. This theory stems from the fact that in Majora's Mask, the Composer brother Flat's parallel counterpart is the one who teaches, or rather reteaches, the Song of Storms to young Link. He's already spoken to the ghosts in Kakariko Graveyard, so it's not a crazy stretch to believe he came across them, willing to teach them their final song before succumbing to the great beyond in the first timeline. Again, capital F on first. But after this moment, Link would never again learn this song in this way, or in whatever way he originally would learn it, because the lesson of the song is placed in the timeline during this repeated Groundhog Day type time period. And this original Link, along with his memories, are lost to time. There no longer exists this world where Link didn't already know the Song of Storms as a child. And so the timeline splits. But eagle-eared listeners may be saying, hey, Solaroth, what's that second thing you were talking about? The Spirit Temple? And to that I say, huh, cool, you said my name right. Hype. But I also say, cool beans, you asked the question I wanted you to. So now we can share that little moment where you mentally congratulate yourself on a job well done. But also, adult Link has to get the Spirit Song that teleports a young boy across the desert. But in order to do that, he needs to cross the desert himself as a big boy and needs the Lens of Truth, a magical item that lets him see through illusions. And the Lens of Truth that he gets as a kid after learning a song he has to learn as an adult now, and, okay, wait, maybe, carry the tune. Crossbow training? Okay, yeah. That makes sense. So, Link drains the well, grabs the lens, follows some dead dude around in the sand, and ends up in the Spirit Temple. He gets nowhere. His boyfriend shows up to give him a song that teleports a young dude to an old place. And hold up, did we just create another timeline? Young Link hits up the beach resort and makes a new friend he otherwise wouldn't have, grabs some chill gloves, and watches his friend get sent to hell. Typical 12-year-old things. Look, I've already fought a dragon at this age. This is fine. So Link's gone and fractured this timeline pretty heavily, as there now sits 2 scenarios in which Link's adult knowledge has created a world that is forever changed by his actions as a child that do not match the state of the world when he first visited as an adult. As soon as you grab that chest with the silver gauntlets, you've created a timeline unlike your first visit to the temple. As you can see, that chest closed outside the Desert Colossus until you open it as a kid. The Desert Colossus is something that can happen, and outside of the chest thing, there's nothing saying that nothing could have happened for the first time after the timeline is set to loop infinitely until the child and adult timelines are created independently. But Neburu, the chief of the Gerudo, is nowhere to be found as an adult, her fate having been sealed with or without young Link's help. But the Man in the Windmill event is where the real fracture begins, and where the first Dark Link is manifested. I hear you asking, what the boys and girls and all those in between and beyond, we are not done yet, because this is my theory video you didn't see coming. I'm using this video to help explain one of our favorite bosses, Dark Link. And oh yeah, guess what? We get 2 of them. That same number as the fractures in the timeline I've created. So if you all thought this was actually a mistake, you have become the one who has made the mistake. The first Link has left his timeline, and when the loop starts in earnest, his energy, his spirit, his memories, that all still happened. They had to have happened. And it's my theory that this manifests in the form of Dark Link. But not just the mid-boss of the Water Temple, but also the Shadow Link that forms from the dark spaces within Link's heart at the end of Zelda 2. That's right, the earlier mention was a red herring, you got fooled again! The final boss at the end of Zelda 2 is the manifestation of the frustration and malice within Link. It's my belief that the Dark Link that confronts the Hero of Time in the Water Temple is the manifestation of the Link that was left behind in Kakariko. He boasts the same style as Link, but he does have a couple new attacks and rhythms, almost as if he's Link but slightly more experienced. Defeating this Link puts his lingering will at rest, and since both Links would go on to defeat Ganon, this is a closed timeline. But the Dark Link created by the split that surrounds the Spirit Temple is likely the candidate that exists at the end of Zelda 2. The timeline where Link never had the lens to cross the desert, nor had the gauntlets to move the stone, would have found himself unable to finish saving the sages of Hyrule, and never would have the power to confront Ganon by crossing the Rainbow Bridge. This Link must head into the past, effectively abandoning this doomed timeline. You know, you have to hand it to Kome and Kotake. They did their homework. They effectively sealed the only way into their temple by putting the key inside. So, where does this put us? Well, it gives us 4 timeline splits for Ocarina of Time, which is 1 more than we currently have. Arguing that the first Link, again capital F, of Ocarina of Time would eventually learn the Song of Storms from the Composer Brothers, which again Majora's Mask reveals to be written by them. So take that with a grain of salt, because that's just a theory of its own. But my theory here is that that first Link would eventually drain the well, claim the Lens of Truth. He'd cross the desert and make it to the Desert of Colossus and be stuck. At this point, the first Link would be forced to go back in time and make an irreversible change by collecting the silver gauntlets as a child, and the time he was from would never see its Link again. As evidenced by that previously closed chest, it's the only physical change you must see that persists between timelines. And this latent energy of these links and the timelines they left behind would not only create the abandoned timeline, but our 2 favorite bosses. Are they not your favorite? They're my favorite. So that's my theory. Do you agree? Does this put a new spin on how you view the Zelda timeline? Is this your first run-in with the Zelda timeline, and are you completely lost? Which, yeah, fair. But if you did follow the insane ramblings of a madman, I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. If you'd like to see more from me, you know the drill. Like, just subscribe, hit that bell icon, and I'll see you guys in another video.